What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It presents a history of sitcoms through Wandavision. This is, of course, our third episode. So if you're new, what we are doing is exploring the Disney Plus show Wandavision. Every episode references sitcoms in different decades, and we're going to take a look at those sitcoms in those decades and tell you why it was relevant to audiences then, why it's relevant to the show, and what influences it has on the story that they are currently telling. If you're looking for who's in Sword and what does it all mean and what's going on, go somewhere else when you're done watching our show. Keep watching it. Stay around. And if you are back, welcome back. We're glad you're still here. This week, we are obviously going to be talking about the 70s, the Brady Bunch, and WandaVision. I am your host, Blake Schultz. With me is Jamie Jarek.
Hello.
And Terrence Tatum.
Hello.
So to start this off, guys, what did we think of episode 3?
Oh, it was amazing.
Whoever wants to dive.
I can't imagine that there's going to be a day where I'm going to be like, oh, I hated it.
This one sucks. I thoroughly enjoyed this one, especially the back half. Elizabeth Olsen is doing the Lord's work in this because she is managing to go from comedy to drama to like just terrifying the hell out of everyone in the room at the blink of an eye. And I think she's just phenomenal to watch. She's
she'd
been
get an Emmy.
Yeah, she should be in the running for that for sure. She's it's just a delight to watch. I love that we get a little bit more of a peel back of what's actually happening, but still enough of a mystery that I'm excited to see whatever happens the following week.
Yeah, this was definitely the episode where if you're waiting for the big Marvel MCU set pieces, they're coming. You have that tease at the end that really shows there's something out here and we're going to get there. So if you're in that boat of like, oh, it's slow and the sitcoms and it's not my thing and I just want end game, blah, blah, blah.
Boo to you.
Sit down and wait. You did it in a movie theater. We didn't kick off Iron Man with big action. He was talking to people. Let them tell the story.
That's the thing that you got to think about. This franchise started with us being in a cave for an hour. So you guys need to slow down.
And that payoff was great. But yeah. I loved everything about it. The set decoration, the colors of the 70s. It's so funny because I feel like it was such a thing in the 90s to go into a house and just see 70s aesthetic left over in homes that were built and neon orange and like big shag carpets and couches from parents who are only ever going to buy one couch. So it was almost reminiscent of that to me, where I felt like I was walking into somebody's old house. And when you look at it with the Brady Bunch, you do see like all the same similarities. Her hairstyle, her dress, the way they're talking keeps evolving. And I loved seeing her like subtle changes in her accent and her performance and just the weird mystery stuff we're getting. I genuinely thought my Disney Plus glitched out when we first like go back in time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did too. I was like, am I buffering?
Well, because for a while, the Disney Plus app on the PS4 just sucked. And it would buffer every time I watched The Mandalorian. It would do a circle and then go all the way back to the beginning and then play. So part of me was like, Roku, not you too.
You too?
That's funny.
But it was great. We get more of Catherine Hahn. We get more of we started rounding out these other characters. We're seeing more of Monica Rambeau and more mystery and still enough I want to stay in this world. I don't really want to ever peel back too much until we're pulling back entirely. I want to stay in this mystery and I like the sitcoms and I want to stay in the bubble. So I thought it was great. Probably my favorite of the 3.
Yeah.
I think it might end up being my favorite of the whole show solely because of the Brady Bunch of it all.
I will say it's interesting to do a Brady Bunch episode with mostly 2 people. Like
honestly, like it wasn't that, it was the aesthetic more than anything. Like the stairs were so Brady Bunch.
That is Brady Bunch immediately. The kitchen, the color of the kitchen and the kitchen setup is very Brady Bunch.
I mean, the fact that Vision had a Kitty Carryall doll was such a big deal. It was the Kitty Carryall doll. So those were the moments that really stuck out to me. I will say my biggest disappointment, since it was a 70s episode, I was really hoping the theme song was going to be All in the Family-esque. I really wanted them sitting at a piano, play the way Glenn Miller played, like really going for it. And but the intro was still amazing, and but not as Brady Bunch-esque as I
I
expected.
say it was more of a hybrid of Mary Tyler Moore and Brady Bunch, because like they did the Brady Bunch with the squares, but the actual transposed color of Mary was very, that's the Mary Tyler Moore style.
And the music was kind of reminiscent, I think, of the Partridge Family.
Oh yeah, very much so. So guys, that brings us into the 1970s. The episode is obviously great. The mystery is there. We know Sword is concocting something, but what we don't know, because we are millennials, is what was going on in the 70s. And as this show changes, as sitcoms changed, audiences changed. Terrence and I are in the business of understanding audiences for film and TV in our full-time job, so it's very interesting to look back. We've finished the 60s when audiences really wanted escapism. They didn't want to think about politics. They didn't want to think about change. And in the 1970s in America, you are ushered into a world of change. We are through the civil rights movements. We are into feminism. We are getting no fault divorce laws. We are seeing divorce skyrocket. We are seeing more blended families, more non-nuclear families. We are seeing the U.S. Supreme Court give us abortion rights, and we're seeing more and more of this. We're seeing people become more politically active. And of course, the more you become active and the more you get engaged in the world, the more you want to see it properly reflected in TV. So as our times change, our media must change as well. Art reflects life, reflects art. So you start getting shows like the Mary Tyler Moore Show. You start getting shows that are focusing on alcoholism, abortion, blended families, these shows that were so much less about just wholesomeness and more about what was really going on, pushing to have more well-written female characters, pushing to showcase episodes about menopause, things you would never see in the Dick Van Dyke Show or in any of these other shows before. The Brady Bunch is often considered the last pure family sitcom. It really was this bridge gap between non-political and political shows. But even the Brady Bunch is a show that its very theme song goes, these are two separate families that came together. This is not a nuclear family. There were two divorces and they came together and made this family in the middle of it all.
Were they divorces? We don't really know.
I always feel like, because I watched the first a couple episodes of this, I feel like the boys, it's led me to believe that they're in a widowed situation.
I think so. I think so as well. And but they never touch on it to the point that's always been so bizarre to me, because I in my lifetime have had 5 step parents. I've had a lot of parent remarriages, and the idea that in episode 2 they're already calling Mike and Carol mom and dad has always been so wild to me. But also after that pilot, which is such a hilarious bizarre pilot, they really never again bring up that they're not all biological siblings or whatever. And it's I actually was watching a clip, and it's when Greg is singing clowns never laughed before, beanstalks never grew, and Carol and Mike are like debating, like, who did he inherit this talent from? And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's Mike.
Right. It's like neither of you, possibly someone else who's not here.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting that, like, even though that was the case, they never talked about it again.
Yeah, because outside of the theme song, you never get reminded of that. And it's weird because the first episode goes out of its way really to bring it up, because there's a scene, I think it's either with Peter or Bobby, I can't remember which one, and the dad, like he had a photo of his birth mother on his dresser, and all of a sudden when the dad comes in to talk to him, the photo's gone, like it's in the drawer, and he's like, where's the photo? And he's like, well, I didn't want to upset Carol when she comes in because she's my new mom. I didn't want to make her mad. And he was like, no, if you want to still have this photo out, you can. And I was like, oh, that's such a deep thing to do in a pilot that is never brought up again.
God. Like, they could have really rolled with that theme, and they just didn't.
I think it almost became a hindrance to the show at the time, because now when we look at it, it's the Brady Bunch. It was the most incredible, since sliced bread. This has influenced every sitcom that's come after it. We have had studio albums, hit singles, variety shows, Christmas specials, movies in the 90s, which JB is going to take us all through in just a mere moment. But at the time when this came out, it didn't connect with audiences. It was never a critical success. It never did do high in the ratings. It never got great reviews. And I wonder if some of that is because of these edgier, more political, more mature, if you will, the darker comedies were coming to fruition. We were leaving behind some of the wholesomeness that the Brady Bunch still entailed. And it's interesting that at the top of the show, they're like, non-nuclear, blended family, don't worry about it. And then we just don't worry about it. It is in a very weird way. You get to something like Schitt's Creek, which goes, oh, we have people of all the LGBTQIA spectrum. We have all of these different people and their genders and everything. And we're not going to address it. It's going to be a world of love. And this is what it could be. I feel like the Brady Bunch did that with whatever it is, divorce, widowies, second marriages, in a way that now is actually very nice. I feel like almost every other show with a divorce, they're like, the divorce, here it comes. The children will never love the step parents. And here it's like, everyone's pretty okay.
Yeah, if it wasn't for this damn dog and cat, we'd be good. This would be
Man, that dog stealing toys, going to the doghouse.
Did we all watch Kitty Carey All Goes Missing this week?
How could you not?
Iconic. A little fun fact, because I'm gonna be so for our listeners, I know a lot about the Brady Bunch history. I just have always been it's the most bizarre, wild journey of a television show that's ever existed. And fun fact, Cindy and Bobby did used to make out in Tigers
inside the doghouse, which is just wild. And there's a lot of stuff that happened on that Brady set. You're just like,
and some of it was really blown out of proportion. Like there's a rumor that that Florence Henderson and Barry Williams, who played Greg, dated, which is really messed up. As she's
weird.
But really, he was 16 and she was 36, and he basically like asked her on a date because he was like hormonal, and she was married. She thought they were just like having dinner, but to him it was a date. So that has like haunted Florence Henderson for like the rest of her life. But Barry also dated Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia.
Right.
So they were all, and apparently Eve Plum really liked Christopher Knight. Like apparently all the ages really,
the levels they stayed with each other. Yeah.
They were really hooking up with each other, except for obviously Robert Reed was closeted, which was like.
It's so sad now that like I heard that and saw that. I was like, oh, that's disappointing that he had to do that for all of this time.
Robert Reed is was a tragic story because he hated the Brady Bunch. He was a Shakespearean classic actor. He wanted to be serious. He didn't enjoy it, and he was closeted at the same time. There was so much going on. At the same time, he treated those kids like they were his own. He was so good to those kids. He took them to Europe so they could learn about Shakespeare. He bought them all Super 8 cameras. Like even though he hated the Brady Bunch, he loved those kids, and I think that's really, really sweet.
Yeah. And what's crazy is because it sucks because he also hated it, but he stuck through it with almost every incarnation that they had.
I cannot believe, because he wasn't in the final episode.
Right.
That was not supposed to be the series finale. It's a really stupid episode where Greg like dyes his hair a weird color, and Robert Reed got in a fight with the showrunner and wasn't going to be in it, and they had planned to do season 6 without him, and then it got canceled, so it didn't matter. And the fact that he showed up, like, what was it, 2 years later on the Variety Hour, and the Variety Hour is infinitely more embarrassing than the Brady Bunch. I mean, he wears like a bunny costume or a chicken something like really ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's the Variety Hour is bizarre because they're all playing the Bradys doing a Variety Hour.
Correct. It's nuts. That's some Inception type stuff. We're doing a show inside of a show, and none of this makes any sense. Like someone was clearly on some very hallucinogenic drugs at that point in time.
But they're singing like a lot of Broadway songs. Like the songs are pretty good, but it's also very clear that Barry Williams and Florence Henderson are the really only ones who sing.
Yeah.
But that only lasted like 7 episodes.
I feel like the majority of the shows, the animated show went a little longer, but for the majority of their shows, they were very short-lived. Anything that was a spinoff of this was like, all right, we'll give this a shot, but you just couldn't recreate that sometimes because they went so far left.
And because like I think a part, well, one, they were terrible, but was no other iteration that featured the whole cast. Variety Hour didn't have Eve Plum. The Christmas movie didn't have Susan Olsen. Then for the Brady, Susan Olsen came back, but Marie McCormick left.
Right.
And it was always weird from Variety Hour on that there was always one Brady not in it. But it is also odd that like Eve left, but then came back. Susan left but came back. It's like, because I think they just weren't doing anything.
They
And
Vin
then-
Dieseled
right,
it.
they
I
were
don't
like,
do
they didn't have any-
sequels, and I will do all the sequels.
Yeah, they didn't have
And
any
in a
work for him.
way, it is also about family.
And they didn't have work, so they were like, "Well, I need to take this check." It was weird though, because I know for a while, and it's still the case that Marsha and Jen, the actresses, just they don't coexist anymore.
So in honor of this, I watched Back Home with the Bradys, the 2019 HGTV special where they all redid the house, which was actually really impressive because the interior of that house is nothing like the Brady Bunch set, and they made it look exactly the same. And you can tell, like, Maureen is Marsha Brady. The way that Maureen McCormick grew up, I believe, is exactly how, and it's the same with Eve Plum. You can tell everything Maureen does annoys Eve, and Maureen's like crying over Florence and just being this perfect, beautiful woman, and Eve's just like still trying to be an actor, and like even now, and like you can tell Maureen really gets under her skin, and I don't really blame her. Like I really think that their dynamic is Jan and Marsha, and I find that to be quite fascinating. The whole, like, they really do treat each other like a family, where it's like they'll tolerate each other, but you can see the tension and the awkwardness when they're all together still. And this was only 2 years ago.
Yeah, which is fascinating. The two of them got a series, short-lived, together. It's like
The Brady
you guys,
Brides.
yeah,
The Brady Brides. Can you believe that all of these are real?
This is nothing. Once we get to the Bradys, it's like
this sounds like a bunch of Saturday Night Live sketches that you're like, well, this will be a good idea.
Speaking of Saturday Night Live, did you know that Marsha was only said in one Brady Bunch episode and was not a thing until Saturday Night Live repeated it, and that's how Marsha became
This
so
big,
iconic.
Iconic,
Because
yeah.
of SNL.
I remember that being advertised so much when I would watch that 70s show, and they were like publicizing the Brady Bunch on whatever syndication part they were, and they always used that soundbite for the like.
Yeah.
It's ingrained. But Jamie, tell us a little bit about these Brady Bunch pilots and first efforts to make this show before we get into the absolute zaniness that is its legacy.
Yeah.
So the cartoon was kind of coincided with the original show, and it didn't last very long. And that's the one I've never seen the cartoon. Then the Variety Hour came after Brady was canceled 2 years later, and that was 7 Banana Town episodes. And then it was the late 80s. No, the early 80s is when they came back for Brady Brides. And that was Jan and Marsha getting married together, a joint wedding, and then living together with their husbands.
They couldn't afford the homes that they had, so they decided to live together. I was like, oh, who wrote what?
Like, I don't have any siblings, but I can't imagine having a joint wedding and then living our spouses together. That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
But the real joy came in 1990, and that is the Bradys.
It's a treat that just keeps giving. It's a fun thing. Do you remember this at all?
Like, you ever watch this?
No, I don't know the Bradys.
Okay.
It was counter programming to TGIF, which once we get into it, what the hell this show became, you're like, what? Go ahead, Jenny.
So it originally was just 6 episodes, and it was in 1990. That was the year I was born, so I did not see it until 98ish. And by that point, it had been repackaged into 3 TV movies, and they were trying to go with the style of those dramas at the time. Terrence, you named some of them to me earlier.
Yeah, like Dallas, Falcon's Crest, those type of like late night soap opera-esque shows.
So they turned the Bradys into a soap opera. And let me just tell you real quick what happens to some of the Bradys. This is canon Brady Bunch history.
That's the thing. All of these shows are canon. Like what happened in Brady's Brides, their husbands still exist in the Bradys for reasons.
It's well, before the Bradys, we had the Christmas movie, which if you haven't seen, watch it next Christmas.
The Christmas movie is a delight.
It is so bad that you can't stop watching it.
That's the one where they sing to get him out of the house, right?
Yes. It is, and the Bradys was kind of like this, like started into the 6th episode of the Bradys. So in the Bradys, Bobby Brady, the youngest Brady, is a race car driver, and his race car crashes, and he becomes paraplegic.
First episode, Blake.
Starts off Bobby Brady paralyzed. Then we have Jan. Jan and her husband cannot conceive, and it's putting a deep strain on their marriage. They eventually adopt. Peter got engaged in the Christmas movie, but then in the Bradys broke up with his fiance, started having an affair with the daughter of Mike Brady's political rival, who's abusive to him. He's got an abusive girlfriend. Then we've got Cindy Brady. She is a radio host who's having an affair with her boss, who's 10 years older than her and has like older children. But the best is Marcia. Poor Marcia Brady. Everyone's living their lives with their paralyzed and their children. She feels so left out. She feels so unhelpful that she turns to alcohol. And Marcia Brady becomes an alcoholic.
Raging alcoholic.
Raging. And interestingly, in real life, Maureen McCormick did go through a bit of a party phase, and she like has talked about like getting really effed up at the Playboy Mansion.
Terrence, you used to do that.
I'm sorry, what? I'm gonna need more about that.
That's a side story, Jamie. We'll talk about that.
We sure will. I don't remember what happened to Greg. I feel like Greg was okay.
I think Greg was fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wound up being this weird like Black Mirror series of the Bradys where shit just went wrong for everyone.
The best part about it though, all this drama. I mean, Bobby Brady is paralyzed and it still has a laugh track.
Of course it does. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Well, this sounds amazing. But if I may bring us back to the 70s for a moment, and please now give me a WandaVision Brady's episode. I need a laugh, or just put a laugh track on Age of Ultron. I don't care.
Oh my God.
I'll rewatch that whole movie if you throw on a laugh track.
Let's do it.
I don't know when to laugh in a Joss Whedon movie. I don't know when he's being quippy and when he's being serious and when he's just degrading his wife. Throw that man out. So we're looking at the evolution of these shows. What was it about the Brady Bunch's comedic style, Jamie, that you think was different from other shows at the time or other shows that we talked about in previous episodes?
Well, I think you kind of touched on it earlier in terms of like the wholesomeness and the just the watching episodes of that show. It's so bad, but so you can't look away. Like I've seen every episode of that show many times, and last night I watched Kitty Carryall is Missing in honor of Kitty being in WandaVision, and it's so dumb. but also like there's something about it. It has something that really works. And I think that's why for a show that, like you said, came at a time that really didn't need a show like that anymore, it has somehow become one of the most iconic television shows in history. I mean, that's why in 2019, the Brady kids are still able to come together, and HGTV can spend $3.5 million on the house because they know people are going to watch it. If they open that up to visit, I'm going. If it's, I would pay, if I had money, I would pay any amount of money to Airbnb to stay in that house.
It's down the street from me.
I really want to go. That is like a top priority when things aren't terribly scary pandemic wise.
Yeah. It's funny because this critically wasn't well received, and it's very much a parallel to what Full House was when it came out in the 90s and how it was not well received. Critics were like, this is trash. But they both managed to, in their saccharine sweetness, managed to like grab a hold of America for a huge portion of that decade.
It's
the
a
90s for
great
this one,
comparison.
and like have become these icons. Like you can't name many people you point at and like, remember Full House? You got it, dude. All that stuff. Same way with the Brady's.
It's just a matter of time till Netflix makes the Brady Bunch.
Oh my god! I don't even believe it. The Full House was the first television show I ever loved. I to this day remember being 5 years old the day it ended, and I was distraught. And it's funny because I remember crying. I remember being 5 and through tears, there's never gonna be new Full House again. And then so I wish somebody would have told me that 20 years later.
Don't worry, Jamie. In 20 years, we got you.
Yeah, I wish someone had told me. I would have been okay with that. I could have waited. I actually want to get a Full House tattoo. I think that I just think that like the Brady Bunch was to like my father what Full House is to me. And I feel like we don't really have things like that anymore, which is fine. We don't really need it. We have family sitcoms, but nothing like those shows.
Well, I would say the nearest thing, the closest is probably Modern Family.
Yeah,
right?
it's just like the way that it's shot. It's different, so you can't. It's not a 1-to-1, but yeah, that's the closest that we have of a family comedy. I think, especially a blended comedy.
And we know Wandavision is gonna do Modern Family. We already know that. And I think that because it's kind of its last option if they're sticking with the family sitcom era. And there are still, I mean, we have Blackish and there are other family sitcoms, but they're not as common.
We talk about audiences, therefore we also have to talk about inclusion and the evolution of sitcoms that I think we'll talk about towards the end of the show of where we are now and where we're going is the Blackish, is the Fresh Off the Boat, it is the Schitt's Creek. Like we can now recapture bigger, newer, more diverse, more inclusive audiences because there is something that we're always going to like about a Full House, a Brady Bunch, a Modern Family, of watching a family. We have the workplace sitcoms, we have the situational, the Seinfeld, the Friends, the 4 people in an apartment, the dating. I think there's just always going to be something that audiences of every age gravitate to when it is a kid, a child in their teens, a more adult child, a family, and a little something for everybody, and we watch them grow up. When I went back to this episode of the Brady Bunch, I forgot that we start off with these children as children. So much of my nostalgia of the Brady Bunch is when they're adults, is the Marsha eras.
I'm with you too. I didn't until we were getting ready for this episode. I had never really seen any of the Brady's episodes when they were kids. Like my brain automatically cuts in probably around late season 3, early season 4 is when I start with them, and I'm like, they're already basically teenagers at that point. So by the time like when this starts, I'm like, oh, they're like toothless, cute, adorable kids. I never was aware of this point.
They're cute.
And it was weird to see them because kids grow rapidly, but for each season they were completely different humans by the time that they came around for the follow-up season.
It's very strange because me personally, myself, but a lot of other people look at The Simpsons as one of the greatest television shows of all time. And should we ever somehow get an animated WandaVision and we can do animated sitcoms, and I'll do that episode forever, but it won't happen, and that's fine. We see Bart is 12 for 30 seasons. And I think if we had known that The Simpsons was going to go on for the entirety of my life, I would rather now have Bart as a 31-year-old and see what he's up to then and now. That's baked in to the Brady Bunch. You're going on this journey of growing up with them, and part of something that everybody has to do is growing up.
Yeah.
So
that's part of the reason why I kind of love the Bradys, that they all turn into terrible messes, because even though they had a picture perfect childhood, nobody can escape reality. Even the Bradys.
You could be a paraplegic.
But car crashes come for us all. It's terrible, but
so
yeah, there is a bit of a reality in that. As much as wholesome, it still is a family we deal with. Oh, they're super sweet, and what you're dealing with day to day, you're like, oh, this is This is just what life goes through.
And that's what WandaVision's going to be. Like, we all know when this ends, things aren't going to be all happy-go-lucky for Wanda and Vision, which it's getting harder and harder to watch them happy because you know it's not going to last. It makes me so sad.
Well, and as they get happier and happier, do we want to transition into WandaVision? I only have one more Brady Bunch question left.
I mean, listen, if you guys want to know what the Bradys are up to now, I can tell you. We could do a whole Where Are They Now segment.
Twin years, a little behind the Bradys. We could do a behind the music whole show.
It's all I want to talk about is the Bradys.
Well, then I have more questions. My first one that I'll ask that we may have already answered. Why has this persevered? Why isn't there a Mandy Tyler Moore studio album? Why isn't there a Maude Christmas movie?
Well,
there is only the Bradys.
The music aspect, I definitely think was them trying to keep up with the Partridge Family.
Mm-hmm.
That was totally the Partridges, and because the Partridges are actually all talented people. I mean, Shirley Jones, I met her when I was a kid, and like she is an amazing musical person. David Cassidy, I mean, that's why they started the Partridge Family. They were a band, and Partridge only started a year after the Bradys and lasted this remainder of the show, so they were kind of in constant rivalry. And I think because people enjoyed the music, so basically that just is kind of what happened. And like, because things transition so much, I don't think anybody was craving musical content from future shows. But like you said, Full House kind of did that.
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had an entire mutagen tour, Jamie.
Oh, excuse me.
They did.
He-Man had a live musical.
Well, I mean, obviously shows continued. I mean, had musical episodes. I mean, my favorite episode of television in the history of television is the Buffy musical episode.
I mean, we got to get a WandaVision musical episode. Psych got a musical episode.
That's true. They did. It's funny. I don't know. I think it's because the 80s don't really, when I think about it, don't have that many sitcoms that really just stick out. That are
the 80s.
Yeah, I don't have that many that stick out. I have a bunch in the 70s. I have a ton in the 90s, and the 80s don't have that many memorable sitcoms. That I think this is just the brand that just kind of took over. Like it's the defining series of that decade, and it just sort of, when somebody wants to recreate some type of nostalgia or some type of that feeling, this is the easiest way to get back there. It's like, all right, the Bradys is an easy gateway to get back to that era.
Well, I agree. I think when it comes to the 80s, the only 80s sitcom, I mean, I watch Cheers constantly, but because Cheers is workplace, I don't think we're getting any Cheers on WandaVision. I think my guess, I think I said this last week, based on the trailer, I think next week is going to be all Family Ties.
Maybe a little Alf.
Maybe. And I have not seen a lot of Family Ties. I really only know about Michael J. Fox's character. So like this week I'm definitely going to be doing some Family Ties research because I don't know. I can't figure out where Full House is going to land, because Full House was late 80s, or I think it was like 87 to 95-ish.
Yeah.
So they could easily do Full House next week, or they could do Full House in the 90s episode.
It could be the 90s bridge. I was telling Blake on our previous, because he was sort of asking, I think it's part of our outline for today. I was kind of thinking Family Ties was the way that they're going, just based on some of the images I've seen. Mm-hmm. The wallpaper that's on the kitchen is very reminiscent to the wallpaper that was on the Keaton's Family Ties family kitchen as well, and the way it's set up. So that's where I'm going. That I also think they are specifically sticking to comedies that are family based. So I think that's why Cheers is out. That's why some of those other like doctoral comedies probably won't be a part of this. But I think Family Ties is probably the way to go. Facts of Life could be another one of those.
That's the theme song I'm hoping for.
Oh,
I love the
Facts of Life. Good.
Yeah,
and take the bad.
You take it all.
That's the
Yes.
show, right? We're gonna end up taking the good and the bad.
I mean, queer
Yeah.
icon Joe. Like, I think every queer woman in the world like grew up to realize, oh, Joe had quite a big impact on my life as a kid.
That was when I was done making my parents watch Kanan and Kel and all that. They would then make me watch the Brady Bunch and Facts of Life and Gilligan's Island on Nick at Night.
That was totally like my dad and I's relationship. I watched a lot of HR Puff and stuff as a kid with my dad, and he had to watch a lot of all that and stuff.
Jamie,
so
I think I told the story in the last episode, but I'm going to tell it again.
Great.
Our like biggest family vacation. My parents spent all this money. We went to the Bahamas. Atlantis is the name of the resort. Very nice resort. Incredible. Something I still remember to this day. Beautiful sand, skies, incredible place. Do you know what I remember the most? Wrapping up the day and going into my parents' hotel room and getting stuff out of the minibar and ordering room service and watching Nick at Night and the Facts of Life. When my parents, my poor parents, bring up this great vacation, I'm always like, well, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them. And that's like when we got back from that trip was when my parents were like, we got to show him the Brady Bunch movies. We got to show him the Christmas movie where they sing to get him out of the house. He's got to see them get off the island in Gilligan's Island. We have to like close these loops.
I love that.
That theme is amazing. Little known fact, that theme is created and written by Robin Thicke's dad, Alan Thicke from Growing Pains, is the creator of the Facts of Life theme song.
Really?
Yeah.
That is fascinating. I did not know that. You know what? That is so interesting. You know what's really messed up? Well, we're talking Alan Thicke. There's an episode of Fuller House where DJ gets set up with Alan Thicke, who plays her brother, Kirk Cameron's father, on what was it, Growing Pains?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? Why would you cast him in that? That's so messed up.
Is there no one else?
I did. That is. Oh, you taught me something. Interesting. Blake, your family vacation story. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up one of the most iconic Brady Bunch episodes, and it's when they go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
There is, if listeners, if you have not watched the Brady Bunch Hawaii episodes, go on Hulu right now. They're so iconic to the point where a Very Brady sequel, the 90s movie with Shelley Long, Gary Cole, the whole second movie is based off of the Hawaii episodes.
I mean you get a whole Scrubs episode out of it.
Yeah. And it's funny because that now so many sitcoms, that is one of the destinations, like if they do away from their main set, they're always like, well, the Brady's, let's Hawaii.
Saved by the Bell went to Hawaii. Yep.
Exactly.
Oh, that I feel like we should talk about the Brady movie a little bit. The Brady movie, because I watched the first one last night, and I was telling Terrence this earlier. I have not seen it in like maybe 15 years, and watching it, I realized, wow, I've seen this movie countless times. I still know the words, and it is a brilliant movie because it is purely making fun of the Brady Bunch, but the nostalgia of the Brady Bunch is so strong. They take every single iconic thing and throw it in. And so if you're a Brady Bunch fan, you're loving that. But if you're a comedy fan, you're loving how they're making fun of it. And the idea of inserting the Brady Bunch into the 90s, like the neighbors are all grunge and care about money, and like the Jean Smart is the alcoholic mom who's flirting with Greg and Peter. It really is I think a brilliant movie, a perfect comedy, and it stars Shelley Long, star of Cheers. They really
yeah. I feel like the Brady Bunch was really the first show to get like meta with itself, and that it lasted long enough to make fun of itself in a way that was still very in tone with itself. We don't get that a lot, where you're never going to get a Simpsons movie that's just spitting on the Simpsons.
Yeah.
No, that would be wild. It's also, I mean, what was that? The Brady movie was 95. It's weird to think that was only 5 years after the Brady's, because it feels like such different eras.
They're so different from each other, or what they were trying to accomplish. Yeah. It's funny because like you think about it, for that 95 film, a lot of those people either grew, like the writers grew up on Brady Bunch, or there are things that they knew. It's sort of like now a love letter, while we're also, we're taking the piss out of some of this. Is also sort of a love letter to old school Brady Bunch, whereas, and it was care done to it, where you could tell from the Brady's that sitcom-ish Black Mirror episode stuff, that was just a check. Like we want to keep this name going. We need to keep something to put on the air to kind of compete against TGIF, and they failed miserably. There's definitely we care. There's heart to this. You can see the difference between a money grab and somebody who actually gives a damn about what they're doing.
And I love that so many of them cameoed. And I forgot that because when I was a kid, I didn't really know what the adult Brady's looked like.
What they right.
And the best is when Peter is getting picked on by the neighbor at school, and Christopher Knight stands up in the cafeteria and is like, "I will kill you." That is not exactly what he says, but he like threatens the kid. But my favorite is Barry Williams telling the movie Greg Brady, like, "Clowns never laughed before. That's a terrible lyric." And so the fact that some of them came back and made fun of themselves is like, that's my bread and butter. Anybody who makes fun of themselves, I love you for it, because sometimes things don't age well.
Yeah, and you can't always take everything you've ever done so serious.
So that brings us to WandaVision, I think. So what is it that is infused in this DNA, the Brady Bunch, that has now spanned for so long? Boils down to these two characters, this android and this witch, dealing with her pregnancy. Why is the Brady Bunch this episode? What is it? The comedy style? Is it the set pieces? Are there themes? What are we dealing with that is analogous to this episode?
It's funny because I watched about 4 episodes of the Brady Bunch, and one thing that they do often comedy style wise is they use a lot of animals for some odd reason. It was a weird thing that they did, like the dog cat thing. There was a point in the narrative with the wedding where the dog is like bouncing on the patrons or whatnot. They happen to have hijinks ensue because of the environment, and this episode definitely did that with the whole, like, by using magic, but the stork actually being a physical embodiment and just like walking around. Like the stork joke is very Brady Bunch-esque, like the way that they do that and how it's coming around and tugging on the pants leg. I was like, that is within the same vein of what the comedy was at that point in time. So it's clearly stylized in the way. I don't think this comedy era has as much of an extreme distinct style like the Dick Van Dyke, which is rapid fire, or the Bewitched, which is kind of like hijinks ensue with magic and all that stuff. I don't, it's a lot more subtle, but there is a style and a cadence to it, like there is for everyone, but it's not as prominent as some of the other ones where you can kind of like, I can point to this. The family element is sort of the biggest thing, and I think for this, with the twins coming, you started just now are using the husband wife, because that's why this episode has the least amount of outside people in it in comparison to some of the other ones. Geraldine comes in at the tail end, but it's mostly, for the most part, the doctor at the beginning, he's out, and then it's just Vision and Wanda for the most part. So it's the family aspect of it that hits the most for this one, and I think that's why they chose this, because when you're blending families and merging families, that's the perfect show for it.
You know what's interesting? If the Brady Bunch had a 6th season like it was supposed to, they wanted to make Carol pregnant with twins. That was their next plan. But it didn't. It was going to be a girl and a boy, like the next generation of Brady's. We also, this has nothing to do with WandaVision, but we have to at least reference Cousin Oliver once, the failed attempt to bring in a younger kid in the Brady Bunch. What a mess Cousin Oliver was. But one thing about WandaVision that I think that we had was great in this episode, and not necessarily like a Brady Bunch thing, but a sitcom thing, was using large objects to hide a pregnancy.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Because
yes.
in this episode, it was done on purpose. She was using them, but that is a classic. I always think a big one is Cosby Show. Like there's constant. So many sitcoms tried to hide pregnancies where women are holding boxes. So when Elizabeth Olsen picked up that, like, I think it was a giant vase, I was like, yes,
she had the fruit bowl, and I was like, I've seen this so many times. Yeah, no, that is perfect.
She throws on Elaine coats. Elaine had to hide her pregnancy
Correct.
twice on Seinfeld, and for a
Yeah.
while is just wearing so many coats on coats
Layers.
on coats.
Yeah. That happens on like Comedies and Drama. Scandal just did when Kerry Washington got pregnant through the run. They were like, she just has this massive coat on. I'm like, it's everyone else is dressed like it's 75 to 80 degrees. What are you doing?
Amy Poehler on Parks and Rec, it was the same thing. Like there's so many examples of that, and I love that because one, women should still get to work when they're pregnant, but
Correct.
two, as a writer, I would be pissed if I had to force a pregnancy into my script. So I think that covering up in a silly way is honestly the best solution.
Yeah, especially
And
if you don't want your character, like if you're writing like we can't have our character get pregnant because it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we may have talked about this last week, and when with Phoebe on Friends, they wrote it in the most ridiculous way. Like if you're going to be that clever about it, which such full circle because the mother of her babies was Deborah Jarrett, who was
Yes.
in WandaVision.
Yeah.
So who I interviewed, go to my Instagram or Twitter and watch my interview with Deborah Jarrett. It was a fun one.
I do love that this episode too. I think they've been doing it all the way through, but I love that this episode does a comedic thing where a lot of the stuff that they would say back in there would just fly, as far as like the sexism or sex class things, where it's like, "Hey, you're a woman, you can't be a doctor." Whereas here, when he says that to her after she's basically just birthed a child, Elizabeth Olsen just looks at her like,
Well,
yeah,
Terrence, that's
wild.
very indicative of the changing themes in the 70s, right? We were seeing shows start to not tolerate this as much. We were seeing America stop tolerating this as much. And I know it's not perfect yet in today's, but like we really were starting to kind of go like, no, we were seeing a big wave of feminism. We were pushing through the civil rights movement. So it makes sense now to throw in some jokes of like, is really saying this nonsense? Like, what year does he think it is?
Right.
It also shows you that some of these people maybe in the simulation aren't quite caught up yet. Moreover, too, you brought up the animals, and I think one thing that's worth looking at when you analyze the episode through this lens is like this stork isn't affected by her magic. And I think as Jamie kind of said, the Brady Bunch had a very weird, like, even though everything is perfect, it's coming for you. You can't escape life and you can't escape reality. And we look at a stork narratively, thematically, symbolism, to quote the Boondock Saints. Symbology. Always think about it. It's bringing a child. And now you see a stork showing up when she's trying to fight against her pregnancy. She's trying to hide her pregnancy, and the stork won't go away. Reality is coming for Wanda. This baby is coming. The Brady Bunch was a show that went, great, you're paralyzed now. I don't know what to tell you. There was no fighting the oncoming wave of brutal reality, no matter how cheeky and fun and perfect your life was. We also see this was the end of the nuclear family in television in a way. We sort of see them stop trying to be normal. Vision uses super speed to get to where he's going. Wanda's openly using her magic. These are now characters that we have seen work so hard to be normal, just kind of accept it in a way. This is life. I got to go get the doctor. I'm going to run like Quicksilver.
Mm-hmm. I love her comment to him when he sees the babies for the first time. When he's like, "Do you want to see your first time with the baby as your true self?" And he goes to Vision mode. I was like, "Oh,
That was really sweet."
Yeah.
There's an embracing of the weird in this episode that the other two episodes really tried to push in the background, and I think
I think because it's black and white and those were super stylized. With the Brady Bunch, you can play a little bit more because Brady Bunch does not have that specific of a comedy style. Because like you're saying, while it's still doing the Brady stuff, there's still, when she's having contractions, her powers are still jacking up everything. Like when her water breaks, water falls out. That's nothing like anything Brady Bunch. That's specific to WandaVision, but it's using the set of the Brady Bunch, but it's still very stylized to WandaVision. Nothing, that comedy did not exist in the Brady Bunch era.
Well, no, I mean, these are the weird horror threads that keep getting baked into the DNA of this show. We have somebody cutting a brick wall. We have glitches going back and forth. The end of this, Wanda throws her out of a bubble into some Cloverfield type military world. There's so much. You could do a like B-side of every episode we're doing of horror movies that are using these tropes to like show you how not normal something is, and infuse that in this show too. Because for every bit of like, where do they get this comedy and where do they get this, you really do have to look at this through the lens of discomfort and horror. And I think that is the opposite of everything these shows tried to do.
Yeah, like that Brady Bunch specifically was trying to kind of be the conduit to, we're not going to discuss all of those things, just come have fun. And this show is definitely like the sitcom aspect of this is definitely trying to be like, hey, we're just having fun, but don't pay attention to all the crazy ish that's happening on this side. Just pay attention to our right hand, our left hand. There's someone sawing a wall.
Well, and it's very indicative of what we kind of said in our first two episodes, right? Sitcoms and in that era were a direct response to us going, I don't want to see the terrible things in the world. We still have people today who watch an episode of Arrow that's about gun control and gun violence and go, why is this episode so political? I've spent all day online looking at all of this. I turned on Arrow to watch the superhero win, and we gotta theorize about this now. Like, but in a weird way, this show is sort of being like, yeah, you can only fight it for so long. We're gonna show you the real shit. Wanda's
Yeah.
gonna wake up. Vision is dead somewhere in Wakanda. Or his body is in Sword. I don't know.
Gonna
We
get
don't know.
sad and dark real quick.
One thing I kind of wanted Vision to do, and I hope maybe he'll do it next week when his I don't know, but I would assume as we go through time, do you? I feel like the kids might grow. That's why. But you know, that's
I
another
think so
type of
too.
podcast.
I do remember seeing a shot of them in cribs and like they were throwing a ball. So I think we're going to actively see. Now I don't know how if we're going to have them grow up expediently like they have been during pregnancy or gestation, or if they're going to grow up as the decades go. It's always funny. I hope they do just all of a sudden become older, because comedies do this a lot where one season they're like toddlers and the next like little babies, infants, and the next they're like a 5-year-old running around. You're like, hold on, 1 year passed.
That's a very soap opera thing.
Yeah.
For sure. Mike Brady is so like he does this in the Kitty Carroll episode where he like really gives a lesson, and the Brady Bunch movie is very funny about that, where Mike Brady in the movie is like giving these lessons that are so convoluted. And I would have loved to have seen Vision. I love to see Vision just like really have a teaching moment where
I think we'll get there. All of these family comedies have to have the moment where the mom or dad sits down and is like, now look,
I mean,
you
yeah.
have a fair trial.
yes, in the justice system.
Yeah.
Like I'm so glad that that's the episode that we kind of focused on, because the lesson was really kind of messed up. And but I think they even slightly, not as well as they could have, touched on the fact that innocent people go to jail a lot. And even I wish that we could have dove a little deeper into the messed up world of the justice system. But
I mean, that would have been an 80s and 90s episode.
Yeah.
We're still in the 70s where they're like, shh.
exactly. But it's
Yeah.
still there
Leave
was
that shit to
comment.
Maud.
Yes.
I really hope now we're now in the era of sitcoms where sitcoms went beyond the television. Cross media. We talked about cross media so much when I first moved into LA, meaning new media on the internet meets music, meets movies, meets television, everything kind of weaving in and out of itself. You used to see The Office would be on television, but then if you went to NBC's YouTube channel, you'd have mini episodes. I think to Netflix's BoJack Horseman Christmas special, and I go, WandaVision, for whatever happens in this story, for whatever happens in the MCU, interconnectivity, yada, 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 it's all very exciting. How it's going to be in Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, throw all that out the window. I want Christmas specials of WandaVision. I want musical specials. I want just every now and then for Disney Plus to be like, she's still in the simulation. It was a long time. I don't know. Here's a Wanda variety hour. We got the Avengers.
I would kill for that.
Cover the stuff that we don't see. Like, I know we're skipping from decade to decade, but there's got to be some time where we weren't watching. Let's watch those episodes.
I love that. When we first saw, before the episodes aired, Wanda and Vision in their magic show outfits, I assumed it was going to be a musical number, and now I feel cheated, even though that was like my favorite scene. I loved the magic show scene, but I just want to see Wanda and Vision in like bell bottoms doing, like, I think I'll go for a walk outside now. The summer sun's calling my name. I hear you now. Like, if we saw Vision doing that, I would lose my shit.
Yeah.
I just feel like we've got the golden goose now that Disney Plus can just keep. If these two actors will keep doing it, you can just kind of do one live. I don't care.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That's amazing. Blake, they should hire you. That's a great idea.
I've been saying it for years. Norman Osborn should be your phase 4 villain. We got to get a live WandaVision episode up. Christmas specials everywhere.
I mean, the Guardians are getting a holiday special. So
they are.
So why not WandaVision?
Yeah. I think if you're playing with this, there's a lot of, like, we're going to all these family comedies, but there's a bunch of other sitcoms that I'm like, hey, can we do a WandaVision Golden Girls? Because I want to see that immediately.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's just not going to be enough time to do all of these shows.
Right.
I've been singing the song forever, but I'm like, if the 90s episode is just Roseanne, if the 90s episode doesn't end with Vision walking into that house and it being empty and he doesn't do the Fresh Prince meme that's now very famous,
yes.
I will be very upset.
I mean, I get why. I would assume the Halloween images we've seen are from the 90s episode because Roseanne was so known for Halloween episodes.
Specifically went out of their way for horror episodes, and I feel like yes, Halloween
is to Roseanne what Friends is to Thanksgiving.
Correct.
And so I'm assuming that's what it is, but I don't know for sure. But I agree. I want more than just Roseanne, especially since Roseanne has become a little tainted recently.
A little bit of an issue, yeah.
Which is a bummer because original Roseanne is an amazing show. It
sucks because two of the biggest 90s comedies are both a little bit of an Cosby Show and Roseanne. Like, let's stay away from both of those.
And that it's so sad because Cosby is it will always be one of the funniest shows ever made, and it sucks that it's hard to watch now.
Tainted,
it sucks. But I think we may have brought this up, but Monica Rambeau is a Fresh Prince fan. I want to see her in some Fresh Prince stuff.
I don't ask for a lot. I just want a little Fresh Prince. I just want one, and I know he's problematic. I understand. I want someone to Kramer slide into a room. All I want. I want
Catherine Hahn, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who else?
Jamie? I was saying, right.
Who else?
Gotta be her. Yeah.
I don't care if there's suddenly in a New York apartment. I don't care if we have to figure out where the kids are. I want one Seinfeld moment. I want one Fresh Prince moment. The rest of it can be Roseanne and Full House.
Yeah.
I just want Paul Bettany to say, what's the deal with something?
Yes.
I don't care what the deal is with.
I'm really curious how they're going to if they're going to do the Full House, the Olsen of it all. I mean, is so.
That's so. Oh, she has. Yeah, you have to bring it up.
And they've definitely said like, no, we never discussed Mary Kate and Ashley coming on the show. That'd be ridiculous. But Mary Kate,
never discussed it. You didn't have some PA like me getting coffee and just kind of being like, hey.
One of the first ever things I was obsessed with was Mary Kate and Ashley. And it's funny because when I saw Elizabeth Olsen in Ultron, I did not know she was Elizabeth Olsen at the time. And I left that movie being like, I love her. Who is she? And to realize that I'm newly obsessed with this woman who I was obsessed with her sisters was very similar to when I discovered Billie Lourd in Scream Queens and realized, oh, she's Carrie Fisher's daughter. And I feel like I'm meant to love the Olsen family. And it bums me out that Mary Kate and Ashley have not acted together since 2004, because there's so much opportunity to have a whole sitcom thing and the Olsen sisters are all there, but I get it. I get why Mary-Kate and Ashley shy away from it. It was messed up. They had a messed up childhood, but it is a bummer because there are so many cool things that could have been done.
Yeah, for sure. I really wish Elizabeth was open to the option, because she easily kills the comedy. Like, can you just go do a day on Fuller House, just one day?
It would have been my
saying,
dream,
guys. Disney Plus got Rick Moranis to come out of retirement.
That's a good point.
The House of the Mouse is very strong.
It's a powerful pull there.
That is, you are making points, and you know they had that MKNA connection because ABC Full House did a whole Disney episode. That's another thing I'd love to see. WandaVision go to Disney like Roseanne did and Full House did. Like they had that whole
all
era.
those shows did that. Like I remember there was a co-episode with Family Matters and Step by Step. They both like a back-to-back episode going to Disney World. That was their whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Terrence Kramer was on another show, just in character at a desk.
Yeah.
I love a crossover, and I don't know how they would do that.
Well, it's Marvel. We can cross.
I said we can cross over whatever we want. Yeah.
I would love that if there. I mean, like that's what Marvel does. Is like the end of credits. We're gonna do all this, the Avengers Endgame. But a part of me is like, what could they cross over here? Can we just like, I don't know, have a Mandalorian helmet somewhere? Like what other Disney Plus shows can we throw in there?
Yeah.
Kristen Bell shows up and she's like, "So what did you perform in your theater school in high school?" It gets really weird.
I mean, I don't know why this show shouldn't be the place to get weird, because I the one thing I said about the MCU with the multiverse stuff was I'm just so glad it's about to get weird. Doctor Strange is going to be weird. Marvel What If is going to be weird. WandaVision is weird. Spider-Verse. And I'm like, let's just stay weird.
I mean, Blake and I, we've said it, as much as I love I'd say I love about 85% of the MCU films. There is a sameness to a lot of them. There's a formula, there's a repetition. You kind of know what you're getting with those. Now that we're on Disney Plus and we're not making something for 4 quadrants, just go nuts. Dude, you got free reign. You've got us now.
I think
do whatever the hell you want.
I think Loki's going to be like a weird one. Like I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier is going to be pretty like normal.
That's what
That's
what the fans are going to want. Every episode's going to be a big action set piece and bombastic, and I'm in there. I want that too.
Yeah, I love me some action. I mean, Winter Soldier is my favorite MCU movie.
It's the best one. That's not even a debate.
Except for that UK list that had it at like 19. You're crazy.
Yeah, they also drive on the left side of the street and drink warm beers. So
that list was really upsetting.
It made me angry this early.
Truly.
But I think
WandaVision was below Thor: The Dark World,
which is nuts. Yeah. But I think Loki's going to be that weird, like quantum leap sci-fi. What the heck is this? And I'm 100% in.
All right, guys. So my last question, and we'll go out. Next week is the 80s. If you could see one show, what would you want to see?
I mean, as previously discussed, I have a giant Cheers tattoo, and I know that it's unlikely that we are getting Cheers, but Cheers also, I think we can all agree, has the most iconic theme song in the history of television. It's pretty up there.
Yeah, it's pretty high up there.
And so maybe at least give us a little like some kind of Cheers homage. I don't like, again, maybe let Vision go hang with his neighbor buddies at a bar or something. I would lose my mind, but I'm not hopeful that's going to happen. But if I get to dream, I want to see some Cheers.
I think you'll get a little Cheers. I think that's the one that I think these big ones that were like, we're not gonna get Cheers in Seinfeld. I think you're gonna get, you can't ignore.
I think that era just has so many iconic sitcoms that they're going to have to sprinkle in a little bit of everything, especially if they're planning to not probably go back to this well again. I mentioned Facts of Life, but another one that I really love, and it's not, although it could be because it is family related, Different Strokes is one where I was like, oh, this sort of fits too, because it's another blended family, and you're kind of like, oh, these guys don't quite fit. Also, another thing written by Alan Thicke. Yeah, I'm just spitting them out there right now.
You're shocking me with this Alan Thicke stuff. No wonder his son became a singer. one thing about I'm kind of bummed that they threw Monica out of the world, because like we need more people of color in this sitcom.
Oh,
I was thinking
Jamie.
that.
I hope
Yeah.
she
We're
comes
not-
back.
We're not done with her. Do you want to hear my big theory for Modern Family? And then I'll tell you my 80s episodes I want, and then we'll go home, even though we're home because it's a pandemic. But
I at this point, if people are still listening, I think they're still listening. So
They're
you
here.
say
I
it.
love you guys.
big prediction. I said we're not going to have them, but my big prediction is the Modern Family episode is not going to focus on Wanda and Vision. The Modern Family episode is going to be at Sword. It is going to be a mockumentary, and that's where we're going to get all the exposition for the show.
I love that.
Kat Dennings and Randall
Yeah.
Park and Monica Rambeau doing stuff to the camera that's just like, so here's what we're doing. And they're going to do a little Office and a little Modern Family, and it's going to be where we get all the answers.
Okay.
And it's the best excuse for it. Like, it's the best excuse. I just want to know who's in charge, though, guys. If I'm picking an 80s sitcom, who's in charge of their days and their nights?
Oh, I know where this is going.
Because I know who's in charge of me.
That's a classic.
Little Charles in charge.
Yes.
And
That's
And
another
while
classic theme.
we're at it, I mean, who is the boss?
Who's the boss? These are the questions we have to start asking. The only questions to ask next week, dear listeners, are who is in charge and who's the boss?
Yeah.
Who could it be? Well, believe it or not, that is our show for this week. That
What
is
a
our.
good one.
I loved it. I had a great time. Jamie, your wealth of Brady Bunch knowledge
Thank
is
you. If-
unmatched.
Please, if you want to know where the Bradys are now, you hit me up on Twitter and I will tell you what each Brady kid is doing with their lives.
And I have to say this, just to treat yourselves. The Brady's, the show, had 3 different theme songs. It had a saxophone theme song, it had a guitar theme song, and the third one, which I think everyone needs to go listen to, is Carol Henderson. Florence Henderson singing a song that is the corniest song that I could ever hear in my entire life. It actually has a line in it that says, "That's how our Brady Bunch became the Brady's," is the tagline for the end of that song. It is terrible.
That implies that
Treat
like
yourself.
half of them died.
Treat
And here's
yourself.
how the bunch only became a few.
It just died off.
All my
also-
life, I wanted to be a Brady.
I hate to be a downer, but I feel like we have to mention that Susan Olsen, who plays Cindy Brady, is a Trump supporter. So fuck her.
You always lose a couple of them.
Fuck her.
Yeah. They're gonna drop off. They're just. That's our show, guys. Obviously, Charles is in charge of me, but you can be in charge of this show by sharing it with your friends, leaving a comment. If you're on iTunes or Spotify, you can leave us a review. There's podcasts, there's YouTube shows. It's everywhere. This has been Hollywood Already Did It presents a history of sitcoms through WandaVision. Huge shout out to Jamie's friend who's doing our new art, by the way.
Stephanie,
Incredible.
thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Incredible stuff. You can, of course, follow the show at Hollywood ADI on Twitter. I'm at As Always Blake. Terrence is at Terrence Tatum. Jamie is at Jamie Cinematics. I, of course, do another show called How Do You Figure with Justin Donaldson, who I don't know why I didn't mention this and why I'm mentioning it on air for everybody to listen to. The Bradys were at his wedding with me.
What?
Justin knows the Bradys.
Of course.
So if you
Okay,
want to
Blake, why are you throwing out such interesting information at the very end that I want to hear about?
because truthfully, I don't remember a lot of that wedding. So go listen to How Do You Figure if you want to hear us talk about action figures and toys and some interesting Brady information, because Justin, of course, has all of the Brady action figures, and we should do that. I'm going to make a note of that episode. Should happen. You're already on the Hollywood Already Did It channel, but of course, Terrence does all of our trailer reactions, reviews, everything else that we don't catch. We do another show called, take it from the top. We do another show called You Can't Do That Anymore about movies that may or may not have aged well or that you can't, shouldn't, or wouldn't make in the year 2021. Jamie, of course, has a lot of great articles and works at comicbook.com. She just interviewed Deborah Jo Rupp. It's wonderful. She has more coming. There's a podcast that Comic Book is doing now that she's on. I think it's called CB0.
It's Phase Zero, and
Damn
that's
it.
where, and we're talking a lot of WandaVision stuff from a Marvel perspective. So if this show you're like, really just sitcoms, which wrong attitude.
So that's the wrong.
Yeah, because who doesn't want to talk about sitcoms? But if you're interested, Brandon and Jim, they know Marvel, so Phase Zero is a good place to go if you're looking for theories and stuff about WandaVision.
And I think that's that, unless Jamie has more.
All I have to say is keep on dancing.